Welcome back to the channel. This is Punched. Today we're going to talk about hedgehogs. No, not Sonic the Hedgehog. In fact, we're going to talk about the fortification type of hedgehog. The game on the table here is Dawn Bend. It's part of the Armored Knights Case Blue series by Grown-Yard Simulations. Okay, this is it's an Eastern Front game in 1942, part of the Fall Blau German offensive in the southern part of the Soviet Union. So, hedgehogs. Hedgehogs are an important combat multiplier, okay? And hedgehogs come in 4 different varieties: Hedgehog 1, Hedgehog 2, Fortified Hedgehog 1, and Fortified Hedgehog 2. Conveniently, the die roll modifiers that apply to both attacker and defender are listed on the respective counters. So, if you'll recall, negative die roll modifiers are a good thing for the defender, and they are a bad thing for the attacker. So just keep those in mind. So we're going to talk about three aspects of hedgehogs today. First, we're going to do construction, including the limitations and requirements for construction. Second, we're going to talk about the combat effects, and then finally we will talk about hedgehog removal. So we'll continue. In this segment, we're going to talk about hedgehog construction and limitations on construction, and of course requirements. So we'll start off, we'll just go down the line, Hedgehog 1 through Fortified Hedgehog 2. I guess the important first thing to know is that you do not construct Hedgehog 2 or either of the Fortified Hedgehogs. You upgrade the prior hedgehog in the line, right? So you start off and you do in fact construct a Hedgehog 1, okay? In order to do so, it takes a full turn, not a full day. There's been some confusion on that, so let me just further emphasize. Hedgehog 1 and the upgrade to Hedgehog 2 require 1 turn. That's the word that starts with a T instead of the word that starts with a D. So just keep that in mind. All right. So in order to construct a Hedgehog 1, you must have either 3 stacking points of combat units or some other combinations thereof. You can't use a headquarters or a supply battalion unit to create a Hedgehog 1. So we have some examples here of units and collections of units that fulfill these requirements. So we have a Soviet infantry battalion, 3 steps, no problem, that'll do it. Here we have only 2 steps of units, but one of them is an engineer. Engineers count as 2 steps for hedgehog construction and upgrade. So we could do that. That counts as our 3 steps. And over here we have 2 artillery battalions. This is 4 steps of units. They count as well. So any of these combinations or others that should be fairly easy to imagine at this point would count. How does this work? Well, you say that you're constructing a hedgehog, and the unit does not move. Okay, according to the rules, constructing a hedgehog consumes the entire movement. Now, there's some nuance here. I did ask at the recent Consim World Expo, I asked one of the game designers, what about artillery units? Can an artillery unit fire a fire mission, right? Can they support another combat? And the answer to that is yes. Yes, they can. They can be constructing a hedgehog and also, okay guys, let's get back on the guns and fire a battery 4 or whatever is necessary. They can do that. I think, this is my personal spin on it, I think by extension an anti-aircraft, light anti-aircraft or heavy anti-aircraft unit could operate in an anti-aircraft mode if necessary as well, because those are equivalent activities, in my opinion. We'll see how that proves out. See the comments below, and who knows, or the description, I may be printing a retraction, but I doubt it. I think I've got this right. So it takes 1 turn. Okay, second step. We want to upgrade the Hedgehog 1 to a Hedgehog 2. Right. So that takes a full turn, right? So we'll take the full turn. It requires 3 steps of, in this case, it's a bit more labor intensive apparently to go to a Hedgehog 2. So you cannot use, you have to use an infantry type of unit or an engineer. Engineers continue to count as 2 steps, and it requires a total of 3 steps as before. So, for example, you could use a submachine gun battalion. You could use a combination of reconnaissance, foot reconnaissance, right? The Germans have their machine gun companies and whatnot. They have to be infantry type units, right, to count for this. So you can't use anti-aircraft, anti-tank, and artillery and so on. They just don't quite have the manpower. All right, that gets you a Hedgehog 2. So let's see, let's upgrade further. So now you want to go to a fortified Hedgehog 1. That's a bit more of an undertaking. To do a fortified Hedgehog 1, you must start, according to the rules, in a start of day interphase turn. So, okay, I'm going to upgrade my Hedgehog 2 to a fortified Hedgehog 1. And you must have an infantry company. Sorry, correction. You must have an engineer company, okay? Additionally, you must have 3 steps of infantry, machine guns, foot reconnaissance, and so on. So grand total of 5 steps. They're sitting there, they're remaining in the hex all day. These cannot be built in town hexes. So we have the town of Kalach over here. You can't build them in a town. You can build them in a village. Villages are okay, they're in bounds. Further, you cannot be adjacent to the enemy when you have started doing so. Okay, next thing. Let's upgrade to a fortified Hedgehog 2. Oh, by the way, a fortified Hedgehog 1 requires half a supply point. I suppose the justification for it is that Hedgehog 1 and Hedgehog 2 are built using mostly scavenged up materials. These are foxholes, slit trenches, improvised fighting position. Hedgehog 2 is where you start to connect up your foxholes into entrenchments, put in your overhead cover, and add some maybe fallback positions and other complexity and such. With your fortified Hedgehog 1, you're also talking about having mines, barbed wire, concertina, maybe some more sturdy building materials that do not come from foraging but come through your supply chain. That's my understanding of the justification. Fortified Hedgehog 2 is the top of the line model here. Again, it requires the same engineering company you must have. You must have a 3 steps of infantry or infantry type units. And you start at the start of day interphase and you end, by the way, I didn't mention that before, both the fortified Hedgehog 1 and 2 start in one day's start of day interphase and they end in the next day's start of day interphase. And again, they may not be built in the town or city hexes, but villages are fair game. Okay, there are some limitations. There is a density limitation. So here we have a line of hedgehogs, and each hedgehog may be only adjacent to to 2 other hedgehogs or fortified hedgehogs. So this is legal. This is not. This is legal. Oop, flipped it over. This is legal. That's perfectly fine. So if you find yourself in a situation where you want to do something like this, then you must remove one of the hedgehogs from play, putting yourself back into a legal situation. Now, a setup such as concentric lines, this is legal, right? And you can imagine additional hedgehogs out here, and so on. That's perfectly legal. So my understanding of this constraint was that the game designers did not want people just going in and carpeting up the entire map, the entire rear areas in particular. So the example, I think the sort of the over the top example is if you can imagine a series of hedgehogs. This is the forward edge of battle area, the front line, if you will, and imagine that all the other hexes to one side or the other are also carpeted with hedgehogs. And we have, the Germans come. Well, in order to fight through, they have to take out the units in the first hedgehog, the second hedgehog, third and fourth, and so on before they can get back to doing some more free maneuver. And I think that the idea was to reduce the number of hedgehogs available, right? Here, let's try this. So this is a more legal setup, if you will. So here, take out the hedgehog and have some scope for maneuver before you hit the second line of defense and so on. So I think that was a decision that was made by the game designers. It is, their rules, their call, that sort of thing. And so just be aware of that particular constraint. So another constraint is you cannot, if I recall correctly, you cannot build or upgrade. No, that's not true. Let me back that up. On any turn other than the midnight turn, a formation, that is to say a division, can build or upgrade 2 hedgehogs. So, for example, if at the start of day interphase you have 2 fortified hedgehogs under construction, that counts for, I think that counts for the full day. I don't know if you count fortified hedgehog upgrades separately from hedgehog builds. I'll have to ask about that one. It just occurred to me. I'd never really gotten that far. I think it might be reasonable to do both. But again, so you have your entire, 9 battalions of infantry, and you would think that, well, all 9 battalions of infantry can move up to some place and then pop hedgehogs, right? Again, that's another game designer decision, and so that's just how the rules are set up. On the midnight turn, your limits become 1. Now, I think the fortified hedgehogs, let me see this. Yeah, your fortified hedgehogs, they go from one start of day interphase to the next, and so you get 2, as I understand it, and the construction completes during the midnight turn, and that's perfectly fine. That's how that operates. Okay, so those are the limits, and next we will talk about combat implications. Okay, one thing I would like to point out is just a very brief segment here on where the rules for hedgehogs are located. These are the primary sources of the rules on hedgehogs, and I think, as is the case in the rules, there may be other bits and pieces sprinkled around, but this will cover it for the most part. So first off, we have the construction summary table, and it talks about hedgehogs, upgrades to Hedgehog 2, and then the fortified hedgehogs. It does point out that the Hedgehog 1 and 2 are full turn construction. The fortified hedgehogs 1 and 2 are full day, starting in the start of day interphase. And also the fortified hedgehog 1 and 2 require each a half supply point for building materials, whereas the hedgehog 1 and 2 do not. And of course we have the rules over here. I'll call attention to the terrain effects chart. So we have the terrain effects chart, and there is a section down here towards the end that talks about your hedgehogs and your fortified hedgehogs. And the constraints that we see here, these are the die roll modifiers applicable to attacker and defender that are listed on the counters themselves, so you don't have to worry much about them. Let's see, we have attacker armor combat strength, which is to say that, okay, the fact that you're in a hedgehog or a fortified hedgehog means that regardless of other potential effects, it caps your armor attack strength, your armor combat strength multiplier at this. Additionally, this is attacking infantry combat strength, and there is a note here that attacking engineers and submachine gun units are doubled. That's sort of interesting when they are attacking into towns, cities, and the fortified hedgehogs. So I think if you can see one up here, this is a town or city, and the same note applies. They're doubled. So despite the normal effects on infantry. All right. Oh, it also says that submachine guns are doubled when defending from fortified hedgehogs and also town and cities. Right. So that pretty much covers what's in the spiral notebooks. I will briefly point out Rule 14.1. It is on page 29 of the rule book, and it covers much of what I've been talking about here, which is the construction restrictions, the density rule, and some other stuff, the removal rule that I'll get to in another segment. Finally, there's an interesting section on unpacking hedgehogs that repeats a lot of this material, including the combat effects and the removal and such, and has some notes here. There is a rule that says something to the effect that if you have a hedgehog or a hedgehog 2 and they're just sitting there unoccupied, you actually have to remove them. So I'll cover that further in the removal segment. All right. We're going to cover the combat effects of hedgehogs and hedgehog 2s at this point in time, and we'll just go down the list here. And so the first thing that I can point out, these are reflected on the terrain effects chart for the most part, and they are also reflected on the Unpacking Hedgehogs segment in the extra visual aids and examples of play booklet. But to summarize, so we have die roll modifiers that apply to both the attacker and defender, and they are listed on the counters, and that's awfully convenient. There are terrain effects that cap attacking armor combat strength that have to do with attacking infantry combat strength. Also, rules pertaining to submachine gun and engineer units. They are typically doubled attacking into or doubled defending from fortified hedgehogs alone, not the hedgehogs themselves. Okay. In terms of combat results, as we recall, your combat results are typically of three kinds, four kinds actually. That is step losses, and there are effects here, 1 hex retreats, 2 hex retreats, and routes. There is some mitigation, I think, on the route table. Confirm that. Yeah, routing. Here we go. If the unit is in a hedgehog, they might get some bonuses to surviving a route check, and they can also get bonuses to route recovery if they happen to find themselves in any of the hedgehog types except for the hedgehog 1. Just 1 calorie, not enough, I suppose. Okay, so that's routing. For retreats, all hedgehogs are capable of absorbing 1 or 2 hexes of retreat. So the hedgehog 1 absorbs a hex of retreat and is removed in the process. Okay. Hedgehog 2s and fortified hedgehogs absorb 1 hex of retreat with no change. Starting at the hedgehog 2, step losses are also absorbed. So for example, the hedgehog 2, while it exists, will absorb 1 step loss, and removal of the counter doesn't come into it. Only retreat results can possibly result in removal of the counter. A fortified hedgehog 1 can, can absorb, sorry, I'm reading from the rules and I need a little bit more information that I'm getting in different places. Right, okay. Fortified hedgehog. So the hedgehog 2 and the fortified hedgehog reduce step losses by 1. the Fortified Hedgehog 2 reduces step losses by 2. So none of these step loss absorptions result in removal of the counter. So a single hex retreat removes a Hedgehog 1 counter. A 2 hex retreat, a single hex retreat on any other Hedgehog, Fortified Hedgehog, no effect. 2 hex retreat removes the Hedgehog 2 counter. The Fortified Hedgehog 1 can suck up a 2 hex retreat, but it degrades into a Hedgehog 1. A Fortified Hedgehog 2 can negate a 2 hex retreat, but it degrades into a Hedgehog 2. So Fortified Hedgehog 1 degrades to 1, Fortified Hedgehog 2 degrades to Hedgehog 2. So there are implications on this. What this means is that you only ever get, the combat results table only ever gives you 1 hex or 2 hex retreats. We'll ignore routes, but 1 hex or 2 hex retreats. So the largest attack that you could possibly imagine in the game, a 6-to-1 attack, is going to deal some step losses, which are slightly slightly mitigated here. But they're only ever going to do a 1 or 2 hex retreat. And so if you happen to start off with a Fortified Hedgehog 2, well, you take the retreat and your units are still sitting pretty under a Hedgehog 2, right? You pop the Fortified, but you're still Hedgehog 2. They must take another 2 hex retreat, and the units are still there, right? And of course, they've been getting the mitigation in terms of step losses. So that is pretty much it for combat implications here in terms of what we're doing with our hedgehogs and so on. Do take a look at the terrain effects chart for multipliers. That's for combat factors. It plays a little part, and just learn what the numbers are. And of course, again, the submachine gun and engineers get doubling. Let's see, they double attacking into Fortified Hedgehogs and towns and cities, and they double when defending. SMGs double when defending. Engineers do not double when defending, but the SMGs do from Fortified Hedgehogs and Town City. And that's the combat implications. There are no changes in what happens in zone of control. None of that stuff is really applicable to hedgehogs. This last segment we'll talk about hedgehog removal. Now, we already talked about removing hedgehogs in the event of a 1 hex retreat, a 2 hex retreat, and then degradation. A 2 hex retreat drops this down to Hedgehog 1, 2 hex retreat drops this down to Hedgehog 2, right? So those are circumstances, and then of course they can be further removed by subsequent attacks. Other things to consider are that in the event that a Hedgehog 1 or Hedgehog 2 is left unoccupied, they are removed from the table. So you can't just build them. I remember playing Guderian Crosses the Muse. I believe they had the same rule in effect. And I was scattering hedgehogs all over the place in terms of both the initial positions, usually occupied, and then fallback positions, usually not occupied. Oops, not allowed. Again, I think that's a designer decision intended so that you don't, for example, you could just run an engineer unit around popping out, 5, 6 hedgehogs per day, and just start to carpet the rear area or start to carpet a fallback position, and I think they didn't want that. So that's pretty much it. Now, at the player's discretion, at your discretion, you can remove a hedgehog counter of any type anytime you want. Call your opponent's attention to it, but you just say, hey, I'm removing this hedgehog. Why? Well, the most likely reason is that you are about to, or discover that you have, run afoul of the density rules, right? So we see a density violation here, and we can fix it by removing this one, or this one. Or for that matter, I think you could remove that one. Yeah, you could remove any of these hedgehogs and resolve, and it really just depends on the tactical situation. Oftentimes you might find that you have built a hedgehog in an odd position, perhaps. Why did I put a hedgehog out here, sort of a little miniature salient or something like that? And you think, oh, well, you know, I think I might remove this guy and straighten out my lines a bit. That'll be highly situational, but that's another example of doing it. So now, let's see, let's check the rule. The rule for removing, okay, enemy units, remove hedgehogs. Remember, it is not possible for units of two opposing sides to occupy the same hex at the same time. So in order for, oh, I don't know, let's say fortified hedgehog. An example would be if I cause a 2-hex retreat out of the fortified hedgehog. So the units have to retreat, and the fortified hedgehog drops down to a hedgehog 1, but is still there. And then I enter the hex. The hedgehog goes away. So that's an example of what we're talking about there. Let's see. Do note, however, that if you somehow capture a fortified hedgehog 1 or 2, they can, what do? They drop down and they can be converted over to fortified hedgehogs on your side. You lose a little bit in the translation. I guess the idea would be that if you destroyed all the steps of units in a fortified hedgehog 1 or 2 and then advance after combat, then you can take over their positions. I think the idea that a fortified hedgehog 1 is converted to a German fortified hedgehog, a Soviet fortified hedgehog 1 converts to a German hedgehog 1. I think the idea is the orientation of the firing positions was forward, and now your orientation is probably different. That's a reasonable explanation for it in any event. I don't believe that's in the rule book. Same thing with the fortified hedgehog 2. It drops down to a hedgehog 2 and then can be taken. Again, this is not typically going to happen. Well, you could do a fortified hedgehog 2, retreat the units out of it, right? Which is going to drop it down to a hedge 2 anyway. Of course, the problem is that if you do that, that doesn't work, does it? Because the German unit moving in takes out removes the hedgehog 2. So it really can't be based on a retreat. It has to be based off of eliminating the steps inside, and then you can take it over. All right. Let's see. The other thing to keep in mind is, any hedgehog 1 or 2 that is not adjacent to a fortified hedgehog and is unoccupied is going to be removed. So this is one thing to consider, that it also says that, I think there's a rule in there somewhere. Tricky. There is no friendly combat unit within 6 hexes of a fortified hedgehog 1 or 2. So what this means is that you could have a defensive line. Let's do pen as defensive line, right? So you have a defensive line with your units are up here. This is your forward edge of battle area, FIBA, right? And maybe fortifications, whatnot, and here come the Germans and so on. Well, up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 6 hexes back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can have the start of another defensive line that is, in fact, unoccupied, but it must be anchored. It must be anchored. Let me see that. There are no friendly combat units within 6 hexes of a fortified hedgehog, so this guy is legally okay to be there without any combat units. And then it says a hedgehog 1 or 2 not adjacent to a fortified hedgehog is unoccupied. So you can basically have a line like this with a fortified hedgehog every so often and have an unoccupied defensive line up to 6 hexes back from your front lines. All right, that covers everything, and we'll wrap up here in the next segment. Well, hopefully this has shed some light and will serve to reduce some confusion from the use and the construction, use, and removal of hedgehogs in the game Don Bend. So hope you liked it. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and we'll see you down the road.